All right, we are live for TNT Live episode 7, which isn't going on the National Telegraph because we just learned that my co-host Wyatt Claypool is a serial pornographer. What is it, 3 weeks ago, we posted the picture and the story with the MP in the Liberals coming in nude, and then today, now we're basically Pornhub. So this is out on my page. We'll put it to TNT later. If you're watching this, hey, Daniel's doing another stream today. Who knows? Welcome to the new internet world. We adjust on the fly. So I'm Daniel, this is Wyatt, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Frank Vaughan, who I would describe as like a high-quality Canadian YouTuber. There's been a prolific series of, prolific YouTuber, lots of subjects, usually very, very well researched. So Frank, I'll throw it to you to just give the people a bit of an introduction of yourself, what you do, what you're working on now.
Well, number one, I didn't find out that these guys were serial pornographers until I got on the stream. So they did not disclose this to me beforehand. But I mean, that's Facebook for you. I mean, that's trying to do business with them. You never know what they're going to get you. I got 3 community strikes, I believe it was 3 or 4, on my page. Every single one I appealed, and I won every single appeal. And after I won every single appeal, they said, we're still blacklisting you for repeated violations of our community terms of service, or whatever the hell they call it. So it's just, it never ends. And as a result of these things, because I've encountered warnings and strikes on YouTube, I've had issues with Twitter. My first account was removed. I've went through about 7 Facebook accounts over the course of time. So I set up my website so I can actually stream video there, and I can upload video there, and it won't crash if 1,000 people try to view a video at the same time. And it's expensive, but this is the kinds of things that we were being forced into doing before Bill C-10 came along, and before this guy who looks like Hans Gruber from Die Hard. I mean, he's perfect.
He literally looks like him. Like, he does literally look like Hans Gruber.
And there's even pictures of him in orange jumpsuits and stuff. Like, I mean, it's perfect. So anyway, that's who I am. I'm a content creator, a commentator. I'm a former federal candidate for Parliament. Got a big 2.1% of the vote. And I'm a concerned citizen. I got kids, and I'm worried about the future.
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to jump into it, like Bill C-10. I think that's kind of what everyone wants to talk about right now. It's a big thing. I'm impressed that some of the mainstream media is even covering it. And it's also like the greatest thing, like NordVPN. You want a VPN, you want to get around Canada's new censorship laws if this pass, like VPNs, you can pretend to be in America or Australia. Or if you want to get Lithuanian Netflix. I mean, who doesn't want Lithuanian Netflix? You'll need a VPN. Okay, so NordVPN, blah, blah, link in the description helps us out. Okay, ad done. But for Bill C-10, hypothetically, you and I, as content creators who are Canadian, who cover Canadian subjects, are supposed to benefit from this because it puts YouTube under the guise of the CRTC, the Canadian Broadcasting Standards, and they love hypothetically promoting Canadian content. But I think it doesn't take more than 10 seconds to realize that what. I don't think Frank and I are going to be too beloved by the CRTC. I could see our content being labeled un-Canadian or not fit for Canadian or doesn't purport to Canadian values, or there's a million different things that a bureaucrat could get us on. So was there ever a point where you looked at Bill C-10 and oh, and maybe they'll promote me in the YouTube algorithm, or was it always hey, I don't trust this?
No, there's no way I'm going to benefit from that. You already have algorithmic censorship to begin with. It's censoring of words, certain individuals, certain pages, like what I have, the warning on my YouTube channel and the blacklisting of my Facebook page. Like, the rules that I'm under right now is if I post content to Facebook, they will not show it in your feed. They will not, they won't even show it to your page likes. There's a reduced algorithm. They won't show it to new people. Like, we're already dealing with that. So when it comes to Bill C-10, I mean, it's a logical extension of what's happening in the country right now. You have rules on where you can travel and where you can't travel. You have rules on what you can and can't buy and where you can and can't buy it. You have rules in certain places on when you can be out on the street or not. You have, I mean, it's a,
and none of these are logically based is the other problem here. It's because it's not like you can understand, okay, Frank, they're trying to keep you safe, right? It's well, no one can go to the small businesses. You have to go to Walmart. Okay, people are ready to go to Walmart. Okay, you can't buy pans at Walmart, but you can buy tinfoil. It's nonsense things. And it's well, if we're trying to stop COVID and we're going by if we're devout Fauciites, you know, if we were true believers in the religion of Fauciism or Camism, you know, the Canadian variant, then we'd say, okay, you know, if you're inside, the closer you are packed together, the worse. So why would you cordon off different parts of the store to sort of force everyone to be even closer? It makes no, like 10 seconds. It makes no sense.
The most frustrating thing about Bill like C10 is I bet if it does get passed and it does get implemented, those who are negatively affected, the government is going to say, well, we don't promote hateful content or we don't promote whatever. And you're going to have tons of people just go along with it and say, well, I guess they must have done something wrong, where people tend to have a bias where if there's a law for something and you violated it, no one's going to investigate if the law was good or not. They're just going to say, well, you violated the law, ergo you deserve the fine or you deserve to get throttled. It's the same thing with COVID, where people will get mask fines when it doesn't even make any sense, but people will like a bunch of hyenas or vultures show up and just start like applauding along with whatever the government's doing and saying how much of a bad person you are and like gain clout off of almost like backing up the government.
Yeah, I think people are complacent in this country. We have a plague of complacency. I remember growing up in the I was really young in the 80s, but I came into my youth in the 90s, and I remember everybody saying Canadians are polite, we're tolerant, we're all these different things, and that's backfiring now because people, they want to believe in something even if deep down inside they know it's not true. It's a psychological tick, and it's probably the worst in the world right here in Canada. So when it comes to this stuff, when you call COVID lockdowns or mask mandates, when you can point to a place like Florida, or you can point to Texas and you can say they have a 30 to 35% vaccination rate, they're wide open. And I saw a video of UFC, 267. I watched this, just this clip of somebody walking into the ring and the crowd's going wild and whatever. I almost cried because I'm like, we don't see videos like that anymore. Crowds don't gather together. People don't live. They don't do the things they're supposed to be doing. And Texas and Florida exist, and they prove by existing that we're doing something wrong. And that's it. That's all you really need. But people want to believe in something.
Yeah, it's weird because I like, and it's like, and there's almost nothing you can do to like show that the dam breaks. Cause like, you know, I you know, being Jewish, we have the Friday night dinners, but we've done it over Zoom. So the extended family meets over Zoom, you know, every Friday night. So I get, you know, I'm by far the most conservative one in this entire thing. It's me versus 20 people. Like, I said, you know, the Capitol riots were bad on January 6th, but also burning down Portland is also bad. And we need to say both are bad. And politics was banned after that because I'm basically Donald Trump. So this is like where my family's politics are. But you see these things when like Texas and Florida took these mask mandates off. And I was listening to them and like I was trying to like, you know, I've been banned from talking. Okay, whatever, I'll respect it, you know, play the piece. And then just talking, oh, I can't believe Texas did this. Like, it's coming in 2 weeks. We're going to see the numbers. And I'm like, well, remember when you said that about Florida, you know, in February, and then it didn't come? And then I'm like, it's been 2 weeks in Texas. It's not coming. Well, it's just the vaccination rates. It shows you that it's totally the vaccination rates. And, you know, what we're doing, it's like, well, yes, you know, vaccination rates and COVID will have something to do with it. But it's not like Israel, which is out like 70 whatever percent. It's at 30%. And they're opening up and they're outside. Like maybe the outside is good. Like maybe this virus was designed in a lab inside in China by Chinese people, by China. All right, then you have it's inside, so it doesn't spread well outside, so it needs people indoors, and then pumping people full of fear porn reduces their immune system, high stress. So if I'm the coronavirus and I'm just flying around, I want to see someone stressed out watching CNN inside for 12 hours straight. Like that's my target. Like that's got to be the best person to infect. And in Florida and Texas, where they're just like, screw it, freedom, you kind of see that might explain why the numbers have gone down after they took the mask mandates and said, everyone, go outside, live your lives, like turn off Brian Stelter.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, again, you have to kind of get back to reality. We're not talking about a high fatality, people dying in the streets type of event. We're talking about a respiratory infection, targets the vulnerable. 90% of the people who have died in Ontario they're died in long-term care facilities. It's around 90%, give or take 5%. There's complications, there's comorbidities, there's all these different things that come into play. But the big killers, by far a bigger killer is medical malpractice. Another bigger killer is heart disease, diabetes. We have all of these things. There's two examples that I'll highlight right now. One is a person I talked to today who's very close in my family, talking about their grandkids who used to play sports all the time. And they would bound up and down the stairs and just very energetic kids who now sit in front of the TV and they just play video games and they slug up the stairs like an old person because they're just that out of shape and they're out of their social elements. The other story was from somebody that I would literally leave my kid with. This person I trust to that extent. There's not too many people in the world that I trust that way. Has a coworker. Coworker's brother's back in India. This is a new Canadian. Coworker's brother was back in India. Got one of the vaccines. I can't remember which one, and died. The coworker then goes into work and just got vaccinated, the exact same vaccine, got diarrhea so bad, all over the place, tried to clean it up, like cleaned herself up, rinsed off her pants, put a garbage bag on, and then tried to go back to work. And it's like, we are racing around creating consequences and complications all over the place. And what's it all for? It's for a respiratory infection. Now, I talked about this back in December and January and February and March of last year, well, 2019 and 2020, and I more or less stopped talking about it in April, May. Like I sort of tailed off because the government script was starting to flip. We didn't know what it was going to be, but we're a year into this thing now, and there's no end in sight, and people are really starting to suffer. And that's in addition to all the emails. I say this all the time, and I don't know if people believe me, but I get emails and I get messages from people all over the place who talk about dead relatives, sicknesses that they've had, healthcare they can't get for themselves and their kids. And for what? We've broken our systems. We've broken our healthcare system. We can't get it back.
Well, I think a good point that Randy Hillier made recently at one of like the rallies I was sort of just watching online is that he said that what we've sort of engaged with, I think this was a very reasonable way of putting it, is essentially social murder through just our way of just not caring about people's well-beings because we're so hyper focused on this one virus. And the thing is, is it dangerous for some people? Yes, it's highly dangerous for some people. But because we think it's the only thing in the world, we're actually essentially killing people or ruining their lives out of just sort of like this psychotic need to only talk about one issue.
Yeah, it's a very human in sense. It's like it's new and it's kind of acute. So, you know, if we got like heart disease, that's like 50 to 60-year problem that people like COVID is a bit more of an acute thing. It's also new. So we kind of we've grown up with tuberculosis, right? And tuberculosis and COVID deaths, I think, are about equal since then. I think, and both respiratory disease, but we're not shutting down for tuberculosis. And if you talk to any doctor, like, I have a lot of them in the family, like, what they will say is like, this isn't going away. It's a respiratory illness. Like, we're going to have to learn to live with COVID going forward, like we kind of did. It's sort of a variant of the common cold. Like that's why we have, COVID-19. That's why it's not COVID-1, right? It's 19, not 1. So we're just going to have to learn to live with this. And you know what? You brought up the point, like you can lock down the medical system for 2 weeks to a month, maybe. And you can get me on the first month of COVID. We don't know. It's a pandemic. Things are scary. Wear gloves, wear a mask. Okay, you get a month of that. But then we learn that, okay, take the gloves off. It doesn't stick on surfaces. All right. What's the mask effectiveness? 0.5, whatever percent. Not much. Go outside with a mask. But the problem is there's no, the religion of there's no scientific method being applied. It's the religion of science where it's like, the scientists do declare, like we have, it's sometimes not even an epidemiologist. It's like, an ecologist who specializes in like, the Amazon rainforest telling us, well, I think that COVID, so a scientist said, like this is never how it went. But you have this thing where like, we're never getting rid of COVID, right? It's here to stay. It's a respiratory illness, like the flu, like tuberculosis, like, like the cold, like it's a disease. It's here. We're going to have to learn to get it. And if we're going to decrease the medical capacity of the system, like this is why you can't lock down for more than a month, because you're bringing the capacity of the medical system. Like, again, my mom was dealing with this thing. Like I was talking to her and she, she's not where our politics are, but I'm hearing a story of her telling how stupid the new lockdowns are. Like there was some guy with like a shunt in his brain. So like a paraplegic, like in a wheelchair, has a thing in his brain. It's malfunctioning. Like the thing implanted in his brain is malfunctioning and it's giving him severe headaches. And he needs to go to the hospital. And he's like freaking in a wheelchair. But like they can't bring him to the hospital where he's been like an outpatient for months because it's not in the regulations that like they can't bring anyone new in because COVID deaths. And it's like, how stupid is this? The guy's had a friggin' the device inside his brain's malfunctioning and he's in a wheelchair. Just bring him into the hospital. But because of the regulations, they couldn't. And then like it took them a week to realize just how stupid that was. And then they but like this, when you decrease the capacity of the medical system, how many people die when you reduce the capacity of your own medical system? And if you do that for an entire year, that's going to kill more people than COVID.
And nobody's tracking that statistic. There's no statistic on the knock-on deaths and the knock-on effects to the healthcare system. I saw an article, and this is probably 6 weeks old now, maybe 7 weeks old, but it was about one hospital in Windsor, and it was about how they were 3,000 elective surgeries behind. Now, I've got a document sitting on my desktop that I've been meaning to do something with, and it's I think the title of it's Hallway Healthcare, and it was published by the Ford government in 2019. And it talked about how broken and overcapacity the ICUs already were before COVID-19 showed up. So they've actually reduced overall ICU usage because of COVID-19, but they already recognized the system was completely broken. So when they showed up and they shut it down and they've created all these backlogs and they kicked all the elective people out, then they tried to bring them back in, then they kicked them out again. I mean, administrators have got to go and try and sort that out. And like, I'm in a weird position right now because I've been lately defending the Canada Revenue Agency of all agencies, saying that they've literally just been dumped on by the politicians. They're running around with their like chickens with their heads cut off. The politicians came up with these ideas and they said, you guys implement it. The politicians come up with these lockdowns and these ideas for restrictions from the hospitals. And then they say to the worker, you go deal with that. You administrators sort out how you're going to do it. And we're just going to stand here and virtue signal. And nobody's tracking how broken the thing is. And my concern is that as we move forward through time, just like the price of lumber is going up, just like the price of used cars is going up, and all these other inflationary indicators are showing and flashing that all the money printing is going to have an effect.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
it's going to start happening.
Oh, it's like really hyperinflation's coming. Like this is, you know, you got the government printing money. Like we're every dollar from CERB handed out was just printed. We just printed money. Yep. It's you know, welcome to the Weimar Republic 2.0. You know, yeah, the racial tension and it doesn't make me feel too comfortable with the situation. But I think we've hit on an intersection where there's like a lot of things going to intersect with things I wanted to talk to you about. It is ridiculous that it is up to people like me and you to sort of track these things. Like it is part of a broken society that there isn't a more mainstream political movement. It's up to like, you know, the YouTubers on the internet to say like, okay, here's some serious things. Like one of the reasons why COVID is so maddening to a lot of people is because the people who are taking it seriously aren't taking it that seriously to do like the right scientific thing. Like, you know, okay, here's the things in the ICU. Okay, how many people are going to lose from decreasing? Like, you know, we need to make tough choices. And I understand why politicians can't be open with the public about making tough choices, like even though it's their job. But you got to imagine there's got to be some doctors who'd be like, you know, guys, like I'm not a COVID denier, you know, wear a mask, whatever. But, you know, A, COVID deaths, B, deaths by trying to prevent COVID deaths. You know, you're dealing with the scale. What do we get into? And it's an interesting thing of like, okay, why is there no political movement or medical movement? And the answer is most people are cowards covering this. Like it's strange that it falls to people like us to bring this up. And
it's because it's people like us who have to bring it up, where you're not massively, you don't have your own TV show, you're not part of the government. So if you bring it up, it's just like, oh, it's just some irrelevant person. So it almost has a reverse effect because everyone can act like you just don't know what you're talking about. Look at no one else will challenge it, just these random small people.
Well, and the people who are challenging it that actually have the credentials, like I had to have, today was an interesting day because I had to have several difficult conversations in my personal life. And in amongst those conversations were people who are convinced because they got handed a pamphlet by the government that they know what's going on. And I said, look, I know you don't trust me. I got long hair. I ran for the PPC. You probably think I'm just some dirtbag redneck, and I understand that. Okay, I'll give it to you. Yeah. But I can give you my own personal acquaintances. I can give you MDs. I can give you PhDs. I can give you nurses. I can give you whatever you want that will offer you a different point of view. I can give you their work, and in some cases, I can connect you directly. What do you want? I'll help you find the alternative view. Don't even get a response. Now, that alternative viewpoint, I'm going to massacre her name, but Carr, Kaur is one person that comes to mind. There's doctors in BC. There's MDs. There's so many people. But if they don't toe the line, they don't get media coverage. They don't get OMA, Ontario Medical Association coverage. They don't get representation by the government. And that's so dangerous. And it links into C10. But before C10 existed, there's a unity of messaging. And if you deviate, you're ostracized. They threaten your career. They threaten to destroy you. And so it is left to guys like us to try and bring it out. But then we have people looking at us going, well, you're just a long-haired freak. Why would I listen to you?
I'm just some kid in front of a map.
You're just some kid. Look at you with your world map. You pretentious.
Yeah.
And I'm just some terrible pornographer.
We got some long-haired red
degenerate. I should explain that for people. I should explain that for people. Facebook's actually, I don't think the stream's even up on
Wyatt
on
goes
Daniel's
to church
Facebook
every week. Guys, calm down, pump the brakes. Don't worry.
But yeah, like so. This stream's not even on Facebook in any way because it's banned me from posting to Facebook in any way, like for the streams, because we posted the photo, which has no nudity in it, of the MP from Quebec, Amos, who forgot to put on clothes when he was on a Zoom call for Parliament, or he was changing in the middle of it, didn't realize his camera was on. Like Brian Lilly, who's a milquetoast conservative, posted that photo, and I'm being like slapped for sexual content because of that. But again, even then, if we bring out something with COVID, you're like, yo, you guys are the ones who almost got banned off of Facebook, so you must be doing something wrong.
So I'm going to pose another theory on why this goes, and not so much from the establishment, from this is my society level theory. And listen, if you swipe right on me on a dating app, you're going to hear about recycling or windmills or something. And I do hate these things. I think, like I say, and it's somewhat sarcastically, and I don't go off this. I rant on this a couple times a year because it doesn't bring a lot of things. But windmills and industrial recycling are what I think is like the biggest problem in society, in the sense that these things actually don't work. So like it's the green energy thing. Green energy in Ontario actually increased emissions and increased prices. But my problem with green energy and recycling, which is bad for the environment, is it makes people feel good. So the problem with green energy is there's a real problem.
Just like your blue bag, that blue recycling bag, you feel real good about it.
You feel good. So this is the problem is, there are real environmental issues and environmental catastrophes. Ecosystems are being depleted. We got to do something about the oceans and fisheries and toxic pH levels, all of that, okay? But the problem is it's all turned into one term. It's all called global warming. All of it can be cured with one statistic. It's a univariate analysis. It's the most complicated thing in the world. No one can understand, but it's a univariate analysis, just carbon emissions. It's purely carbon that determines global warming, and that's everything. But we have this thing in the environment where we just want to feel good. So our priority of feeling good actually stops us from doing good. And when you try and bring these issues up, people don't want to hear it because people want a little endorphin release of I'm a good person whenever you put the pop can in the blue thing instead of the gray thing. And you want to feel like you've done something. I kind of see this with COVID, where we want to feel like we're saving lives, but we don't actually want to then have to make hard choices and really think about it. And deaths in category A versus category B, right? We just want to feel like there's a solution. We want to feel like if I go to my mask, if I'm wearing my mask outside, I feel like I'm doing something. And I think I think people don't want that threatened. I think people want to feel like they're helping.
Well, and it's incredibly superficial. All of those things that you mentioned are superficial ways of feeling good. So like if you watch the typical public using their masks, they're reusing the same mask over and over again. They're handling it like any potential good, because there is no
straight out of the pocket, straight out of the pocket right here.
Straight out of the pocket. I mean, I do it too. I'm just complying at this point. I'm not that concerned about it. So if I want to go and do business with Costco or something, instead of arguing with the person at the door and live streaming it, I need their product. I need I need it. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get it.
I'm not being that guy that's like picking a fight everywhere on the thing. Yeah.
But like I watch these solar panels. I got beside my place, there's these solar panels. So they come in, they pour the concrete, they put all this energy into it. They erect the panel. You got to manufacture the panel. It has a fixed life cycle. It gets thrown in the landfill. There's no recycling facilities available, even though you can recycle them in theory. And every 2 weeks, there's somebody in that field fixing them, because they get all screwed up. So like the sun's over here and the solar panel's facing the wrong way. And it's fun. You can just sit here and drink beer and watch them chase the sun all over the sky and completely miss it. And like, there's no way that's more effective than just straight nuclear or straight coal or any of these other options.
The funny thing is the only thing propping up coal these days is the green energy. And there was a Planet of the Humans, the Michael Moore sponsored documentary. The alternative title was Everything Daniel Said About Green Energy Was Right Over the Last 10 Years. Why didn't we listen to him? But that was a bit too long, so they changed it to Planet of the Humans. But the thing is that you learn that the only thing propping up the coal industry right now is you need coal to build these solar panels and the windmills. It's like that's like the prime use of coal, because coal's inefficient. Like coal is beaten out by oil. Like the great thing about oil is we discovered oil. It's so much more efficient than coal, right? Efficiency is the amount of the carbon you burn gets turned into energy. Oil is much better than coal. And then we found natural gas, which is natural gas is to oil what oil is to coal. No one would ever use coal again if we were allowed to use natural gas. It just doesn't make sense. It's way less efficient. You get more, like, if you're a greedy capitalist, you'd want natural gas. If you're a hippie environmentalist, you want natural gas. But the only way we prop up coal at this point is because you need coal to build the windmills and the solar farms. And yeah, maybe there's some West Virginian lobbying and Pennsylvania lobbying to keep certain things open and whatever. Like, I'm not here to shut down the coal plants. I'm saying you want to shut down the coal plants. What I've always said is stop with all the crazy regulations on natural gas, and then we'll stop, and put some regulations on natural gas. Like, but like say, yeah, same thing with the oil industry. You want to mine resources from an area, you got to leave it the way you found it, or better. Like, that's, I'm fine with that.
Well, especially on the technology, like trying to get people to use more efficient technologies. They're basically taking an approach, to even put in like simpler terms, like you can't buy any, you can either have a T-Bird or you can have a Tesla. You can't buy any car in between those things. The T-Bird almost costs nothing, and the Tesla is going to be like a fortune for you to purchase. So no one's ever actually buying anything more efficient. They're just staying with their old beater cars that are far less safe for the worse for the environment, or they're telling you that you have to essentially take out a loan to buy a new vehicle. It's like why cars were actually less safe, or the roads were less safe in the 70s, is because all the safety regulations kept people driving worse cars.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because of the studies that talk about the carbon footprint of the electric vehicle industry. Like, measuring pollution in terms of carbon, you're never going to win on that measure, because everything produces carbon, and in essence, existence on Earth in a way, I can't say it's carbon neutral, and I can't come up with the term that I'm looking for right now, but you're going to produce it no matter what you do. Yeah. And the environmental impact of trying to put all your eggs in one basket, like Tesla's basket. I mean, Elon Musk is laughing. He's going to have a good time. And some of these other EVs that are going to come up,
because he said some things. I think he might have said something like, I think, men and women are different, or so he took some highly innocuous positions on reality.
How dare he? How dare he talk biology?
Yeah, I think Elon Musk like endorsed reality a few times over the last couple of years, and like now he's like basically part of the alt-right. Which is another.
Well, and he likes Bitcoin too, right?
Yeah, so. He likes Bitcoin too. Oh, okay. I was going to say this. This is my line when you talk about carbon. Like, this is what I like to say to people, like, who talk about like the CO2 emissions. This is the number one thing. It's the existential threat. Climate change is going to kill us all. Like, I can't have kids because I hate that. By the way, the anti-human thing. But I said the way you break through this, I found, is this will work on any left-wing person. It's like, okay, if reducing carbon emissions is the only thing we need to do, okay, fine. What we need to do is, the January 6th riots, those are terrible. Yeah. What we need to do, if that's the number one thing, is we need to throw riots globally and install Donald Trump as king of the world, because the only country to reduce carbon emissions to the Paris Accord standards from 2016 to 2020, the United States of America.
Don't talk facts. Stop.
So
Trump does not do good things.
No, if we're talking that reducing carbon emissions is how we save the planet, then we need to install Trump as king of the world to save the planet, right? And then,
I heard this stupid excuse for why the U.S. was able to reduce emissions. They said, well, no, that was California, that was New York, that was like Vermont, it was Washington State. Like, they never changed their policy when Trump came in. If anything, they started just doing their policies more. So it's like, well, what did they hit the crossover point where they stopped increasing emissions and they suddenly started decreasing them? That doesn't like wash, but those people do have in their minds that Trump can't be connected to a good thing. So ergo, it's bad.
Yeah. Also, can someone tell me, where does electricity come from? Is it like the electricity fairy or something else?
Well, and there's three things there, and these are really important. Number one, Alan Savory, if you guys don't know his name or your audience doesn't know his name, there's a 20-minute TED Talk by a guy named Alan Savory. He produced a theory in the 1970s that said that the elephants were desertifying Africa, so they had to go in and they got to kill elephants. So they killed like 45,000 elephants and discovered that desertification increased. So there's an attack on meat right now, and there's an attack on herds, and there's an attack on animals. But this guy is there to tell you that putting animals back on the land actually greens the world. That's number one. And I think people, like, when you talk to the left about the environment, they're really bad. They're so down on meat, and it's actually herds that need to go back on the land. I'll be completely honest, I forgot the other 2 points. There's just so many things in this conversation that just swim around in my head.
We're just swinging around the environmental stuff. Like, I want to let's talk back to the left and the meat. And this is okay. This is one thing that I do despise about the modern left and the environmentalist movement, the anti-human element to it, and the nihilistic elements to the modern left that I find so dangerous. And like, I just can't take you seriously in any sort of long-term like you can't, like, the one good thing about COVID is it like all of a sudden like went from like everything needs to be aborted, like humans are killing the earth, to like every single life is precious. Like a 97-year-old grandmother needs to live to 98, and if she doesn't, like on a friggin' dime. Like it went from like, you know what, I believe in abortions up to the age of 10 to like every life is precious, no matter what. And that was kind of nice, but you know it's not going to last. But the thing I find infuriating, and you know, sometimes I like Bill Maher and he does stuff, but sometimes he's like, you know, there's too many people, and there's like too many people, and it's like the overpopulation, and there's too many humans, and can you like, we're rooted. I hate this. It's ascientific. You know, Malthusian, you know, theory was debunked a bunch of times. There's this great thing, because like I always say, like most people watched the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, and I said like the best Avenger in this movie would have been you know, Milton Friedman, who could have just gone up to Thanos and explained to him why his plan was flawed. And had Milton Friedman been there, they wouldn't need to punch anyone. They'd just been like, oh, listen, okay, productivity. And Thanos' plan was stupid because it doesn't population caps and carrying capacity. And like, sorry, I took 11th grade biology, but like we have this thing where it's like, I find it very disturbing that Thanos was a sympathetic villain, because like his plan kind of made sense. And how many times do we see this narrative played over? I noticed so much in pop culture that, oh, the villain, you know, yes, he wanted to murder millions, but it was to save trillions. Like, what? That's not even true. It's not even true. Can we not debunk this thing finally? It's been debunked a bunch of times. There's this great like economic freedom forum. They did a breakdown of Thanos' plan and proved it quite well, but yeah, I find the
people disturbing. All these people who are like sort of on the further left or far left, who sort of come up with who have this rhetoric or are filled with this rhetoric, they'll also be the people who are completely confused on how like the Soviet Union or Mao's China can sort of crop up. And I'm not saying that their politics are exactly the same, but you'll get these people who have an incredibly anti-human perspective. They were like, well, no, people have to die if we want to achieve slightly lower carbon emissions. And it's like, now you don't, but you don't understand how people can maneuver themselves into the position where they're like, you're an ideological traitor who needs to die. These people care about human life so much. It's like, it's not that big a step from going for, you need to die for the climate, for Earth safety, for our society can't handle your hate speech, so you need to go.
Well, and we talk about carbon and we talk about people, but how much of the Earth's problems are just simply down to mismanagement? Like when we always talk about, or I should say our great glorious leader, Mr. Herdrew, talks about single-use plastics. This was a big thing and everybody applauded and they thought, oh my God, he's so great. So there's golf clap. Yeah, or actually, we got to do this because we don't want to be offensive.
Let me get my drink water bottle type sort of thing.
Nice. So anyway, there's a film out there, and I can never remember the name. It's like Seascape or Sea something or whatever. But this guy goes out to the Pacific garbage patch, and he's out there specifically to prove that single-use plastics in this context are destroying the oceans. And what he finds is that 49% of the waste out there is these fishing nets. As the Chinese are going along, it's Chinese fishing nets. It's not like people are like, oh, you talk about China, you're racist. No, let's get real. We're talking about 1.5 billion people in the Communist Party of China and their practices in every part of the planet. So they're taking these fishing nets and they're literally trawling the bottom of the ocean and they're ripping up all the coral. Now, coral's a big carbon sink. Once you rip up all the coral, it's very hard to replenish. Like, these are real problems. The riverways are polluted. Plastic pollution's off the chart. Not, Canada has its share of plastic pollution, but it's like there's all these things and they're not going away. In the age of COVID-19, I used to talk about my farm produce because I go to the farmer's market and I'd be the first guy there with like tomatoes or lettuce or whatever. And the government would show up. This person would get out of a government paid car. It was always a 6-cylinder, nice car. They'd get out, they'd have their lab coat on, they'd pull out their nylon or their gloves, their plastic latex, thank you, their latex gloves. They'd get a styrofoam cooler out. They'd pull out all of these plastic bags, and then they'd take samples of my produce to test them for heavy metals, which, by the way, they don't do to imports. They just do it to domestic products. They'd put them in there, and then they'd load it up in the car, and they'd drive it away, send it to a lab, test it. There's all of this waste produced, and it's the same with COVID. There's masks all over my back road. I live in the country. There's masks in the ditch all over the place, and it's like, so We're virtue signaling about the environment, but we're doing absolutely nothing to stop the cycle of degradation.
That's where the electric
feeling good about the environment over doing good for the environment. And that's what I've learned. It's the priority is we want to feel like we're doing something over doing something, because no one has very few people have the bandwidth for a hard conversation that challenges your your ideology going into it. A lot of people just want that little endorphin rush when you throw it in the blue thing instead of the gray one.
Well, here's the thing is every single corporation who's trying to signal how environmental they are, and it just sort of shows people's psychology is sort of messed up when it comes to environmental issues. People will see every corporation who's trying to signal that they're green. You'll see their website and they'll be they'll have plants all over, in jars or something, trying to look green or whatever, and they have these nice white offices. Everything looks very sterile, so it looks very green. I'm you're looking at that and it's you do realize that all those plastics that they're showing that around their office actually technically signal that it's a far higher carbon footprint to make that office space that they're trying to make look very natural and minimalistic. If it was a concrete building, you'd be oh, that looks bad. I don't like looking at that. And a lot of the times it's I don't like the look of coal power plants.
Green is clean, right? You that's kind of thrown into the ideology of we want a clean environment and we want clean and good, right? It's it's very basic human nature. Ooh, white is light, dark is bad. Look up, don't look down. Heaven's in the sky, hell's beneath the earth.
And it's the same thing with COVID, that we look like we're sterile, we're wearing masks, even though technically we've all been reusing this. I've reused masks for sometimes 2 weeks. I'm less safe than if I just didn't wear one, but we're all just sort of just in if this weird Instagram
plague, you'd be dead.
Yeah, we live in an Instagram commercial where everything's just supposed to look nice.
Yeah, it's an incredibly superficial. And you said we don't have the bandwidth for these difficult conversations, and it really struck a chord with me because we're rare. I mean, you guys probably have the experience of laying awake at night thinking about this stuff, and you read books, and you choose to spend your own time beating your head off this wall constantly.
I choose to make a living out of it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. But most human beings aren't like that. They consume media, and this has been my challenge. It's I've created a lifetime of space for myself. If people want to learn about the low carbon lifestyle, I'll teach you all about it. You're not going to like it. It involves a lot less technology and a lot more sweat and a lot more blood, and I've lived it. And I like my creature comforts and I like my technology, but people have no idea what they're playing with or what they're asking for at a fundamental level. And they're not exactly willing to invest the time to learn. So it's 15 minutes a day, maybe, of news consumption, whereas you guys might be engaged in hours. Or in my situation, I've probably had 15 years of increasing time freedom, not financial freedom, time freedom. And that's how I've measured my life and my success is how much of my own time do I get to spend the ways that I want to spend my time? And money's important, but time freedom is more important. And I've created this new set of change, which is it doesn't matter what I know. It doesn't matter who I know. It doesn't matter how articulate I can put it out there. I cannot reach back through time and pick the guy up that's only spent 10 minutes a day at best thinking about this stuff and getting most of it from CNN or CBC and pull him up here. He wants it in a soundbite. And I'm sure you encounter this too. Everybody wants you to give it to them in 2 minutes. And it's very difficult to distill complications.
I will defend, anyone watching this is also the exception. I've built an audience where it's every Wednesday I do an hour. And a lot of people say, I understand not everyone has an hour. They want, I do the 5-minute videos as well. But there is also people who, when they do make the time, will crave an hour to 2 hours of something substantive where I think no one really likes the CNN panel where you have, the ultimate CNN, the plane went missing, the Malaysian plane went missing, and we have a panel about it. No one can just say the plane is gone. We have to have different points of view. Mm-hmm. The plane is gone. No, it vanished. No, it disappeared. No, you're wrong. It's off it was dumb. Right. So no one likes that. And people are starting to, Joe Rogan has a gigantic podcast. That's 3 hours with someone. People like Dave Rubin came up, Jordan Peterson became some megastar, and he's a university professor who had these huge Bible lectures. So there's an appetite for people who do crave substance, and we do crave substance to ourselves. But there is this, what I find it's not so much is the time, there's again a bit of a dissonance here. And where people want to believe that they want the truth presented to them in like pure numbers. Like they want to pretend like they're kind of on the spectrum and like their ideal newsman, they like Daniel Bordman or Frank Vaughan. They say they want me to come up there and be like, on November 15th, 9:15 a.m., Justin Trudeau turned 13 degrees to the left and said XYZ. This was then followed by like they think they just want the facts. But ultimately what people want is they want a bit of showmanship. They want me to present it in a way that will make them laugh or keep them entertained. But they don't want to admit that because you want to say that, hey, I'm all about the facts and the news. So
here's another element I sort of see, because I'm more on the writing end, so I'm not really much of a personality that people sort of follow. That I find that these days, so many people, and I hate when people just throw around the word truth all the time. They'll just use it as a buzzword, as if I say I'm a truth seeker enough, at some point it equals truth. And I find those people, even if they're on the right or the left, they share the worst, most bias confirming things ever. But I find so many people are demanding propaganda. I'll have loads of people, if I write something that's slightly critical of Aaron O'Toole, people showing up and saying, well, why don't you publish the truth? Like, why are you letting Trudeau win? They are demanding I just become conservative party propaganda. Or even from other sides, like I'll have people wondering why I'm not being PPC propaganda. Like, why didn't you talk about Maxime Bernier? Like, it was irrelevant to the article, but they want me to be like, they want you to contort yourself into just what they want. It's not everyone, but I find that people want to, I think there's a lot of things, like people want something quick. People want something like they want it delivered to them in like less than a minute. They want 8,000 facts in less than a minute presented in a straight way. Like what they want is unattainable. But I do think what they ultimately do want is like, I do try and bring my background in stand-up comedy into some of these things. And what I try and do is I try and take serious issues and make them in a way that they're entertaining so people can sort of learn from them and then have a way to, then articulate that view to the next person and down the line. Like, I think that's where the value is in this, is like, you have to bring some sort of value to like, you have to bring some sort of added value to the news you're putting out there. And it would be nice if we could just live in a, purely factual world, but that isn't it. So it is, and this is why the internet is great, because it gives us the means to do it. Like, I could never do this, in the 1990s, and we could never be anyone in the 1990s in this sphere. So that's great. And this is, again, why Bill C-10 is terrifying. But I want to ask you about this, because this is one of the things I most respect about you is, you did the principled thing of going PPC. Like, I was the, I don't like Andrew either, but I'll vote CPC, whatever. But you went from, principled PPC to one of the most principled critics of the PPC. And, that I just want to know, what did that do to you? Because you must have had a quite highly, like, how much of your audience kind of state was Frank Vaughan, and how much of them was like, no, PPC for life? And what was that experience like, sort of?
I think, well, number one, what you said about banners, Wyatt, it's a problem on the left and right. It's everywhere. There's this team sport type mentality, and it leads into what you're talking about with the PPC. When I signed on to the PPC, I signed on to a commitment that was made about a party, a particular style of party structure, and where things were going to go. And my commitment had an expiry date. The CPC was lost, and it's been lost for some time. And it's more lost now under Aaron O'Toole than it's ever been. That he's going to get destroyed in the next election. So I thought it was a good wake-up call. I thought there was potential there for a real people's party. I mean, if you're going to call it a people's party, you got people in it, right? Yeah. But then after the fact, I started, and I waited 6 months after the election before I even opened my mouth publicly. I kept everything private. There's a lot of people out there who said to me, you should do everything private. It's like, I did. I made the calls, I had the meetings, I talked to the people, I kept everything quiet. And then it got to an inflection point where it's like, you know what? I'm actually going to voice an hour's worth of my opinions on this in public, because there's nothing left to do. There's no constitution. There's no peoples in the PPC. If Max Bernier disappears tomorrow morning, the PPC just evaporates. There's no mechanism to keep it going. And these are really important things. And what it did was, I'm blocked by half of the people who used to religiously follow every word that I said, and they can't intellectually bring it. So they insult me. They call me a pedophile. They say I'm a terrible father. They come after me personally. And luckily I've been doing this long enough that none of that stuff matters to me. It gets to me sometimes, but it's not like at the beginning where hairs would go gray and I would get horribly depressed. It's like people out there really hate me. I'm so used to this. So that's kind of what happened. But there's a core of people who aren't, I wouldn't say they don't follow me. They like the work. They like to engage with me privately and publicly, and they stick with me, and they disagree with some things. They agree with most things or whatever the case may be. But and this is something somebody told me a long time ago, a really smart guy. He said, and I still think his number's a bit high, but he said 60% of your audience, Frank, will always be people who hate your guts. And I thought, you're crazy, man. Why would people watch something they hate? Well, I think it's true. There's a lot of people who watch, because I see the metrics on my website. Like when you're burning through terabytes of data when you put up a video, you do some calculations on the average download, and you can figure out roughly how many views you have. And you can also have a counter as well, a little flawed when IP addresses are shared and everything else. But you see it, and it's like, or you see the engagement. So you put out a tweet and you get like 400 or 500 people engaging with it, but it only gets retweeted like 10 times. And it's like, there's a lot of people who hate my guts, but watch everything and listen to everything I say. So, I mean, that's kind of an interesting dynamic there. And
yeah, I mean, I get, yeah, I can, like, for myself, like, I follow Linda Sarsour on Twitter and, like, people I disagree with, like, but not everyone's like me who's, like, following everyone to make sure that their political echo chamber, doesn't solidify so they can be the best political commentator they can be. That's more of, like, a professional choice. Like, if I was still just doing stand-up comedy, it'd be, like, sports and, like, just a few people I liked in politics.
Pop culture things.
Pop culture things. Yeah, if I wasn't me right now, I'd be freaking out right now about Aaron Rodgers saying he wants to leave the Packers. And this is like I would hijack this entire episode would be about me rambling about Aaron Rodgers, how bad why are you drafting a fullback in the third round or a running back in the second round? But I did my own video on that, so we're gonna push that out of my, I'm gonna start to get a bit riled up there. Namaste. Daniel. Yeah,
I'd start steering the conversation around to who the greatest of all time is, Tom Brady. So
yeah, I mean, I respect that. I mean, I respect Tom Brady now. I mean, I'm done with my Brady hate, and Belichick, he might be an evil demon, but like at least he understands football. Like one of the things that drives me crazy in the NFL is like how the coaches who are supposed millionaire geniuses can't figure out the most simple thing that I could figure out right away. Like, Belichick got the new kickoff rule like right off the bat, like. All like the implied time management skills. It drives me crazy. Like every coach should consult with me before running a 2-minute offense. Like everyone, it just drives me crazy how they don't get this. Like Aaron Rodgers gets it, so I'm terrified when he leaves because Aaron Rodgers is brilliant and a beautiful man. But
I'm sure if you publicly publish your phone number in this live stream, they'll get a hold of you.
Yeah, him and a lot more people. There's some people I'm kind of hiding from these days.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Hi, Aaron.
But yeah, it's interesting what you learn as you go down this road and down this journey, and the things that people think you're capable of, like masterminding some big conspiracy to undermine. Like they'll tell you that you're irrelevant. And then they'll say you're trying to undermine Max and you want leadership of the PPC. And it's like, you can tell them 100 times over, I don't want that. I've explained what I want. I've showed you what I want. I've said what I want. And you're still implying that I'm being paid by Trudeau, being paid by the CPC, doing all these things. And like, I'm living my life. I know who I am. I know
people during the last election exposed me as a paid operative of the Conservative Party, but I was also exposed as a paid operative of Maxime Bernier.
Good job.
I was making bank last election. And probably for Trudeau too. Max, it's like you're working for Max and Trudeau, or you're working for Scheer and Trudeau. So I was just making bank. Little did people know that I was actually in the pocket of Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh was behind it all. Welcome to New Khalistan, everyone. Saskatchewan is now Khalistan.
The NDP has so much money they can afford to pay you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think you're hinting at something here.
That's why they sold debt. The NDP went into debt buying me off.
Yeah,
that's right. And then they had to sell the Jack Layton building just for you.
Yeah.
Then Daniel proceeded to waste it all on scratch-off lottery tickets, and he won, and he got no money from it. But no, I think you're hinting at something that people want in both, in like, especially your case, Frank, that they want a good story for what's happening. When it's like often reality can sometimes be incredibly interesting, but it's interesting in a very boring way where you have to keep up with the details and know what's happening. Like, man, people who think that like American politics is like House of Cards, like you haven't seen anything until you've looked at Canadian politics, but it's all boring details you have to get past to be able to figure out what's happening. But people just want to be able to sum it up in 10 words. It's like Frank's paid off by Trudeau and he's like fishing buddies with Jagmeet. It's always just the most simplistic stuff ever. Like, I don't like Aaron O'Toole, ergo somehow I go down to Trudeau's beach house every other week.
Yeah, so I mean, here's like an interesting thing I think we could all talk about is like the deep state, right? And everyone talks about it, and to an extent, like, the deep state, or as I call it, the deep province in Canada. Like, yeah, there is something, but what I find frustrating, and I want your opinion, is like the amount of, the people think this has been planned for 350 years by the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or the whoever and George Soros, and there's a puppet master. Like I can tell you how the deep state in Canada kind of works, and it's not genius puppeteering. It's like they're a bunch of idiots. And it's really simple. It's just like dark money, apathy, and stupid regulations. Like create a confluence, and then you throw some critical race theories and some government bureaucrats with left-wing leanings, and it's the deep state is kind of mostly it's like entropy at this point. That's kind of what we're dealing with. But for you, like, what's it like? Like, what's your conception of like the evil, like how do you see, let's say, like the nefarious establishment, the deep state or whatever, and how Lisa Raitt just got kicked out? That was hilarious because I enjoyed that. But how do you conceptualize the deep province?
The deep province, the deep state, the deep Canada, the deep. So there's a lot of ways you can look at it, and you have to sort of break it down. You can look at it at the international stage. You can look at it as the United States as an empire, which it is, an empire on the wane, but an empire. You can look at Canada. Money, old money, has a particular mindset, and that mindset plays out in this plane, in this human theater that we call Earth. So they do certain things. It doesn't mean they're united in purpose necessarily. Mm-hmm. They fight amongst each other. If you, and that's kind of at the international stage. So if you want to talk about a 300-year course of events, you can talk about a 300-year course of natural consciousness and people chasing more and control and loaning leaders and playing games, because it's a natural human tendency to conspire. If you go to Canada, you can talk about that a little bit, but there's also in Canada, the deep state or the deep province is bureaucracy. There's all of these interwoven bureaucracies, and they exist quite apart from your politicians. So you cast your vote, you send somebody to the Hill for 4 years, and that guy spends 4 years, or that girl spends 4 years trying to figure out how the hell to interact with this arcane bureaucracy that's more or less. There's a show, actually, a British show called Prime Minister or Prime Minister. It's a British show. If you just search Prime Minister,
I think you mean Yes Minister.
That's it. There's Yes Minister, and then there's Yes Prime Minister when he goes on to become the Prime Minister. But like that show's it. Like that show does such a good job of satirizing what I think it actually looks like in Canada, where everybody's just opposing everybody else and trying to keep their bureaucratic or union or their established power base together. And when people talk about conspiracy theories or everything else, is it not natural for central bankers to get together and conspire as to how to keep the power to print money and redistribute wealth outside of taxation? That's natural human nature. Is it not natural for the teachers union to constantly exert their wealth and power to promote not just the individual members and their interests, but the interests of the people who run the union? It's sort of natural. Does the RCMP want to be disbanded and federal policing be ended in Canada? They're probably going to oppose that very vociferously, because it's a natural thing for humans to get together and conspire and do things. So,
in self-interest, right?
Where people get it wrong is that a lot of that stuff happens, but people get it wrong and they assume that these people are skilled at what they do. That a lot of I would say the most powerful people in Canada,
that's skilled at what they do, and that the teachers union is then connected to the central bank, who's connected to the RCMP. That they're all have mutual interests, which
a lot of
like,
people,
great
a lot
for
of people
small
just, a
towns.
lot of groups or people just happen to be in the same car or have similar interests. A lot of them are so paranoid, they do not cooperate well together. Like, that's the thing, is like, if you ever meet like a handful of Canadian politicians, the through line with all of them, or other bureaucrats or people who work for like strategy firms, is they're just paranoid people. They don't want to talk to you. They will tell you nothing because they think everyone else is going to knife them. They are actually not a unified force. There's a reason why Trudeau's very powerful, is because like, everyone's so paranoid that idiot can get in. That he's not a particularly smart or skilled politician, but he's very good at like playing this very dumb game of like interacting with people who are paranoid and having no shame.
And convincing enough of the electorate with the power of his last name and his dashing good looks and his lovely eyelashes to vote for him and win.
Yeah,
he's
like true. Like, people thinking
my wife says he's not that good looking, and I'm like, what are you talking about? He makes me question how straight I am. I mean, look at him.
That's the thing. And Trudeau's the ultimate, like, I love to talk about the superiority and inferiority complex Canadians have towards Americans, where we like to sort of create policies based on, like, basically Bernie Sanders.
Not American.
We're not American. Like, Bernie Sanders will say something insane. The American right will say that's insane and shut it down. But then to, show to our American left-wing friends how great we are, we'll pass that insane thing and be like, look, Ontario is $15 an hour minimum wage. And then America's like, yeah, we don't care. What's Canada? Where is it? North, south? I don't care.
What?
Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we build things. And we have this sort of like anti-American stuff. And we like to pretend like, oh, America, they're just this celebrity culture and that's Donald Trump. It's like, Donald Trump is 2016. We elected a drama teacher in 2015 because of his last name. Like, name recognition matters. And this is, you might have been saying this before the stream, but the Andrew Scheer thing, like, he'd probably win the next election just because more people would know his name by now. And, he's better than Aaron O'Toole. Like, who would have thought I would be missing the days of Andrew Scheer? Like, I thought,
yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. He seems like a nice guy, at least. And the thing is, again, people acting like Aaron O'Toole's like conspiring with other people and whatnot. Like, have you seen Aaron O'Toole? Have you seen him fumble through debates? Have you seen him like try and put out a coherent media strategy for his carbon tax? He's not smart. Like, he just happens to be at the top of the pile of a bunch of paranoid people who won't stop him.
My experience of being in politics last time, if I ever did it again, I would do it a little differently, because when it comes to Andrew Scheer, I think I got it wrong. I actually think he's a nice guy. And I think he might be a sincere individual. I don't think he was that good a leader. I think he was kind of weak, but I kind of regret the way that I went about it sometimes. And I can't quantify that. It's just a feeling, because it's all in the past.
Here's what I said about Scheer. And like, so I can be like, I was right about this one, because I was I think the PPC is better, more philosophical I am, but it's worth the vote for Scheer. So Scheer's sin was incompetence and cowardice, whereas Aaron O'Toole's sin is corruption. Like, Aaron O'Toole is actively going to undermine the movement willfully. The people he's connected to, suing me into oblivion. There's enough on Aaron O'Toole where it's like, no. There's willful shift to, like, he's gonna make the carbon tax. Whereas Scheer won't fight the carbon tax. He'll just try and like duck and then get in and then not do it. Whereas Aaron O'Toole is like, no, I'm going to do it myself. So he's like, and I said this about the PPC, like, I was saying to the PPC, it's a really bad strategy, guys, to say the Conservatives are just like the Liberals, because it's not true. Andrew Scheer is not Justin Trudeau. That's bad messaging. And, if PPC needs to be different, they need to tell the truth, right? They can say, here are the flaws with the CPC, and there are many flaws, and I'll list them off for you now. But it's not true just to, like, when Maxime Bernier says, that, they're all Marxist globalists. Andrew Scheer's not a Marxist globalist, guys. He's incompetent, he's cowardly, and you might be better than him. I get that, He doesn't have a backbone, but that's not true. Whereas where the truth, like, now I don't fight that. When people say, what's the difference between Aaron O'Toole and Justin Trudeau? It's like, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know where it is philosophically.
The speed that they're driving towards the cliff.
Yeah, that's my thing. It's like, yeah, if Justin Trudeau's going to drive 100 miles an hour to the cliff, that's bad. And if you want to say, we shouldn't go off the cliff, that's one thing. But
I think it's even less than that. They're fighting over who's shifting into fourth. Like, it's like I want my hand on the shifter as we go over.
Aaron O'Toole's gonna be like, no, I'm gonna take it down to 93 miles an hour. We're gonna drive off the cliff at 93 miles an hour. It's like, well, can we not drive off the cliff? Like, can we turn around? Can we stop the car and turn around?
Racist.
Racist, sexist, anti-gay, Daniel Bordman, go away.
But, sorry, this is another thing I brought up. This is another thing I brought up a few episodes ago with just like Aaron O'Toole, and I think a lot of the Canadian party, like just a lot of MPs are basically everyone's like, there might be conservative NDP and liberal MPs, but the biggest party in Canada is the cocktail party, because every single person just wants to be accepted, wants to be able to be on CBC panels after they're out of office. They want to be liked around Ottawa. It's just this it's just a bunch of high school social pressure nonsense where everyone just sort of wants to be part of the club. So everyone rejects
I like
people.
to say that the initiation thing is like to get part of the club, you get in the CBC panel, and then like you cry with Charles Adler, and then you're officially a conservative on the CBC. Like that's the ritual process. You're baptized in Charles Adler's tears. You know, you listen to a clip of me saying like the Muslim Brotherhood is bad, and then like Charles Adler cries, and then you are baptized into a mainstream media panel as a conservative.
Charles Adler. There's a funny story about Charles Adler, because he wrote a piece. So when Bernier announced the PPC, when he had that press conference, and he came out and he said, I'm breaking away from the Conservative Party. I'm ready to do the hard work, and we're going to do this thing. He left the stage and he went on vacation for, I think it was 2 weeks, up to the lakes in Quebec. So this was a problem. So anyway, Charles Adler started, he wanted to interview Max about his new party. He's like, wow, this is interesting. So let's interview him. So he calls up the secretary. And the secretary just says he's on vacation. And Adler's like, you're kidding me, right? Is this really what you're telling me? So there was this big mad scramble that the first public relations crisis of the PPC occurred right after he announced the creation of the PPC. And it's interesting, Charles Adler was at the center of that. And so there was a picture that was posted, and it goes back to the PPC's promises of a constitution. There's this picture. And if you go far enough back in Max's Twitter feed, he's sitting there. He's got the country in the background of the lake, and he's got a stack of papers on the desk. He's got his glasses on, and he's got a pen. And it's like, I am writing the founding documents and the Constitution, and we are on our way. And I found out long after the whole thing was staged to just try and get Charles Adler off his back. And many years later, we still don't have a constitution. So
all that was missing was him in a white jumpsuit crying in front of a fence.
State of Canadian politics these days, yeah.
And people and that's one of the unique things, because it's a problem on the right, left, and the center. It's a problem that's ubiquitous. But like a person like AOC just gets away with that. Gets away with diving into a garbage can, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, and like being maskless in a park after she virtue signaled. They just get away with murder. And you can't hold them accountable for anything. Like Trudeau, try and make a meme that lists all of his scandals on one page that's actually legible without a microscope. And you can't do it. I've tried. I've actually tried to do it. You literally can't fit it. And
think about how the fact of them
covered. So I'm going to go in this piece. Like one of the things that drove me crazy is the SNC-Lavalin thing. And this is why, like, this is my fury with Andrew Scheer and his Conservative Party is like, stop going along with the SNC-Lavalin scandal is because he fired an Indigenous woman. Like, shut up. I don't care. I don't care that Jody Wilson-Raybould is Indigenous. She did the right thing. Good for her. And this isn't a criticism of her. She did the right thing. What she did was principled, and good for Jane Philpott for backing her. The problem is Justin Trudeau effectively tried to turn Canada into a dictatorship that day. There is no such thing as a Canadian Senate. Might as well be the Canadian Senate. It's equally as useful, right? There's no Canadian Senate. The executive is combined with the legislature in Canada. Like the prime minister is the executive, like the president of the United States, but he also is the head of the legislature here. So the legislature and the executive are combined into one. The only balance of power we have in Canada is the judiciary. The only balance of power, which is why you're supposed to have no interaction between the two. What this scandal really was is Justin Trudeau taking lobbyist money from his friends and trying to override the judiciary, right? And basically rule the judiciary from the prime minister's office. That would effectively centralize all the Canadian powers into Justin Trudeau's prime minister's office. And that was the scandal. And that was earthbreaking. It's the biggest scandal in all of Canadian history.
And the way that the CBC covered it was what cool and interesting ways is Justin Trudeau going to do? What sort of interesting?
How are they going to cover? How are they going to get out of the scandal? So they didn't cover the scandal.
What sort of backflips is Trudeau going to do?
How are the Liberals going to try and mitigate the scandal? How are the Conservatives going to try and play up the scandal? So they never talk about the scandal. They're like, how are the Conservatives going to try and keep it in the news? Because it's very hard to keep these things in the news. No, it's not. You are the news. Just talk about it.
It's not. Remember Mike Duffy Mike Duffy was like a scandal for like over a year, and that was the most boring thing. Yeah, like those things actually ended careers, and like Stephen Harper's not prime minister probably in large part because of the Mike Duffy stuff. But we're like, well, how is SNC's not a story anymore? Charity's not a story anymore. Like, we had weeks of coverage because someone bought an $18 glass of orange juice, and then a Liberal did the same thing shortly after Trudeau was elected. And it was like a $25 glass of orange juice, and they're like, well, the orange juice scandals are a thing of the past now.
Cash for access. I mean, all of it, and it's because and it's so trite to say, because especially here, but we have a state broadcaster. We literally have a communist broadcasting network that we pay for. The CBC is paid to propagandize us, and like, they disgust me. Like, and this is nothing new, and I hate even saying it. I almost want to yawn saying it because I'm so sick of saying it. But like, anybody, and there's still people out there who think the CBC is objective.
I just wrote a story about the CBC yesterday. One of their reporters from Waterloo or London, they were covering just Derek and Randy Hillier and going to the Church of God in Aylmer, Ontario. And the writer literally put in, because they were just mentioning that he was kicked out of the Conservative Party caucus, they said that he was kicked out for donating to a white supremacist group, because they didn't even have the story. They had the story so backwards. They said it actually shows you how big the media spin on what happened was. Is that like, it's a complete nothing scandal if you know that Paul Frum donated under a different name and it was like no money at all. But look, it's almost like this writer assumed that the story must have been that bad based on all the hubbub about it.
There's zero scandal there to begin with. And this is kind of something that bothers me about the Conservative Party. It also bothered me at times about the PPC. So somebody cuts a check. Are you for $10 or drops $10 in a hat and somebody takes a picture of it? Are you supposed to vet every $10 bill that comes through? Are you supposed to vet every single donation? Why doesn't somebody just come out and say, look, the donation came in. I didn't check the names. The Conservative Party took a cut of it. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? I took his money. I don't like the guy. I don't like what he says, but I took his money. Why wouldn't I take his money?
There's a thing of like, I have a problem with capping donations. I think there should be no limits on what Canadians can give as individuals. No corporate donations, no foreign donations, but Canadians could give the max. And then I'd say, but then I believe in this world that, like, if someone's giving $10,000, you got to vet that. Right? You got to vet
big money.
The big money you vet. If someone gives you $100, like, I don't care who it is.
Yeah, Frum was $100. That donation to Derek was $100, right?
Yeah, it was like 113. But even that, even when that CBC writer, they had to edit it like 2 hours later. I don't think anyone even told them. I think what was funny is that the first draft made it to publication for a couple hours, so that was fine for at least 2 hours. He doesn't get an apology. But even when they changed it to he was kicked out of the party for accepting a donation from a white supremacist, and it's just lying through oversimplifying the story. That was Aaron O'Toole's stated reason for kicking him out of the party, but it makes it sound like he was like in a dark alley and soliciting a donation directly from Paul Frum while they were like sharing some ribs.
The way I take it is, it makes it sound like they're up on a stage and Paul Frum is doing a check presentation to Derek, and Derek's shaking his hand and he's like, "Welcome to the club, buddy. Would you like the microphone?" Like, they make it sound like it's this known factor, and it just
the
isn't.
Other thing is, on this scandal, is it's clear that the Conservative Party turfed Derek intentionally. Like,
of course,
it's like
he was too much of a threat.
It's not, unless it's over like $200 or something, these things aren't public, which means someone inside the Conservative Party had to go through, tip off the media. But
the public doesn't know that, right? The public has no idea how this, like, how many people have ever run in federal politics? Sorry to just jump in, but it's like, people don't know the rules, and the media, whose job is to teach them, doesn't teach them. They propagandize them.
And that's why people are that's why I think this is a wonder thing. These people will come to people like you and I who will say, okay, guys, like, let's break this down. Like, this is, here's point A, point B, here's your conclusion. Like, I'm not like, I didn't set out to become like a journalist or anything, but I just thought I could do better than the CBC. And I'm a stand-up comedian by trade, but I can offer my opinion and say, here's why I have my opinion. Here are some basic facts of the case, make your own. But clearly, Derek was an inside job.
That's what I was saying when I said that Canadian politics can actually be far more interesting than American politics. If that story was broken down on the fact that If they followed the story, and you should have been going to Aaron O'Toole's house and questioning, hey, why did the media even know about a donation that tiny when it was under a different name? That's insane. How would they even known it was Paul From based on the fact it was Frederick P. From? Why did you guys clear it? They didn't investigate any of that. And
like,
just going back to the CBC,
how much bigger a story that is, that like, oh, someone took a whatever MP no one cares about, but like, why start like this is actually some pretty interesting.
That is a House of Cards story.
Yeah, that's like crazy politics. Like a constructed inside hit job against an MP who ran for the leader. Like this would draw people into Canadian politics, but there's no will to cover these stories in Canada. It's weird.
That's not what the media companies in Canada represent. They represent, okay, Derek is a threat to the storyline that we are selling. So if we can concoct this and we can sell it in a way that gets rid of him, that's the goal. It's not a goal of like, I know, again, it's like preaching to the choir here, but it's so important to understand.
Yeah, they're not newsmen. They're the media wing of the Liberal Party, and they got
or even just the narrative. So when it comes time that they figure Trudeau has to go, if they can get somebody in the Conservative Party seat that can take Trudeau out and still keep the agenda online, well, then they'll support him. It's
for 5 seconds. For 5 seconds until there's a new Liberal leader. Yeah, until it's either Chrystia Freeland or somehow Navdeep Bains make it come back, and that, you know, the 50 million reasons why he had to leave, if that somehow resolves itself and no one finds out about it. But you know, I had my money on Navdeep Bains coming out of that thing over Chrystia Freeland, but you know, he had to resign because no reason.
But going back to the CBC, this is the reason why they're sort of like the most dangerous news source in Canada. Like, I think people understand the Toronto Star is very biased to the left. Press Progress, everyone knows it's an NDP front group, basically. Even if you don't know that specifically, you're like, these people are NDP. The thing with the CBC is the story that like a woman, Kate Dublinsky, wrote about the people being fined or being charged for attending that church service. Technically the details are right, but it's just sort of the reading between the lines. It's the reading between the lines. She never brings up the constitutional or the charter right violations angle of the church wanting to meet and hold a service. They only quoted Derek about the fact that these are violating our charter rights, which makes it sound like it's just his opinion, man. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that's cool. And then when it goes to, well, technically he did accept money from a white supremacist, but you accept has a lot of context baked into it that people don't know anything about. Where it's like when Press Progress does something, they almost fall over themselves because they're clearly they're clearly either socialists or Maoists.
You want to play this game, and it's like you wanted me to find the list of who's donated to the Liberal Party. Like you want to play, okay, $130 is it from a white nationalist. Like that's our level of like, okay, you know,
Peter Nygaard.
I could find you. Pedophiles is one, but like how many terrorist related, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars could I find within a day of money that went to the Liberal Party? Like of, you know, people either connected to like the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaati Islami, the Khalistani movement, like whatever you name it. Like you want to play this game, which of course they don't want to play. It's just the white nationalist thing. But if this is the rules, which it's not, it's the narrative. But if there's the rules, I could sing everyone in the Liberal Party in one day. I'm not going to spend my time doing it. I'm going to kind of do in my spare time, but I just know it's going to be fruitless. I could show CBC like here's like Osama bin Laden, he gave 10,000
here's another story that never caught on. Remember Monty McNaughton, the Minister of Labour in Ontario, verifiably left his riding or left where he lives to go and stay with his parents over Easter break. The thing is that Rod Phillips did the same thing. Basically, the evidence was the same as we have a photo of them not there. We didn't have a photo of Monty McNaughton, but clearly it's a photo of a car outside their parents' house. It's verifiably their parents' house. He's parked in front where he's clearly blocking someone else who's parked in the driveway also. So multiple groups of people are there, but you can't get the mainstream media to cover that, despite the fact that even just the way that Monty McNaughton's own press secretary got back to us was clearly them scrambling to try to come up with an excuse. A Saturday email 45 minutes after we tweeted out a picture of it, and you guys are already on us. That's crazy good timing on your guys' part. You just happen to look at the email, but the CBC doesn't want to cover it because, well, we already got Rod Phillips, and now Ford's going through with everything we want on COVID. He's putting in place the really harsh lockdowns, so we're not going to Rod Phillips Monty McNaughton.
Yeah, Doug Ford's an interesting thing right now because he takes a lot of heat, and I've given his government a lot of heat, but I can remember when he was running for leader, and I was quite involved, and I remember how contentious the end of that was and how contentious things were between him and Elliot. And so he comes out on top. They come out on stage. They raise up his hands. It's all unity and everything else. And at that stage, I firmly believe that Doug Ford intended to be a populist. In a sense, I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm just speculating here, that he's been rooked. Like, this is the end of his political career, and the curtain's going to come down on it, and we're going to have Elliot come up and assume the role at some point in the future. I don't know where, but he's pigeonholed himself in a sense because he's gone along with so much of what Trudeau does. He has a hard time looking like he's opposing him. All they argue about anymore, it's just like Aaron O'Toole. It's vaccines this, vaccines that, vaccine. It's so boring.
It's whatever. It's the safe zone. It's where Michelle Rempel makes her money. It's like, you know, in things that are just like, you know, the liberal government isn't effective and the liberal government is corrupt. Never fighting them on the ideology. Never saying like, hey, you know what? Like, can we put, like, this man was convicted of 17 different violent rapes. He's not a woman right now. He's not going into a female penitentiary. Like, you'll never see Michelle Rempel say that. Like, that's that's something that's a fight that we need to have. But that's never where they'll fight. They'll be like, you know, Justin Trudeau should have more vaccines. And we said, and it's.
Well, to any Michelle Rempel fans, she literally cried for Bill C-16 to be passed, cried for people to be able to have their constitutional rights violated, to be forced to like, for the government to be imposed compelled speech on people. She cried for that to happen. That's insane. That should ruin her career among conservatives. But I guess she puts on a cowboy hat and talks about pipelines sometimes.
Yeah, it's that's the safe conservative thing. It's like pipelines, right? Pipelines, and let's satiate Alberta. Let's try and tamp down the separatist movement. Let's be like, Trudeau is bad at what he does, and pipelines. It's like, yes to the pipelines, and yes, he's bad, but can we like be a bit conservative here? Like, this is the thing we talk about a lot all the time. Like, you got to actually stand by your conservative brand. And if you shy away from your brand, people are going to intuit naturally, because that's what humans do. They're going to intuit that there's something wrong with conservatism if you, as the leader, shy away from it. And it's maddening.
Well, and even if you want to shy away from it, if you don't want to call yourself conservative, you don't have to call yourself conservative. You just have to stand up for things that are right versus wrong. And there's no, like, I long for a charismatic leader who can actually do it, who can actually debate effectively, who actually just knows the talking points. Not even, forget talking points. It's such a garbage term. Who just knows how things are working and can articulate them on a dime and actually shake things up, who isn't afraid of just approaching these tough issues and saying in public. I mean, try and find a conservative that will stand up in public and say, hey, I don't think kids at 9 years old should be able to sterilize themselves because they've been convinced in school that they're transgender because someone came into the school and told them that. There's the billboard guy, Bob,
the guy who put up the billboard in Vancouver, the Chris.
Oh, the guy that wears the billboards. He goes all over the country. He was attacked by Antifa, had his arm broken.
Something. I know who you're talking about.
But I mean, like, somebody to come along and put that guy in the spotlight a little bit and say, you know what, this guy's got a point. That, like, he published an audio that he was shared out of I believe it was a school in Ontario, and it was like a 40-minute audio of one of these classes. It's literally somebody coming in and saying, there's male and there's female, and then there's the gray area in between, and transgenderism might be right for you. And so you've got all these kids, and I remember being a kid. I'm sure you guys do. You're closer to it than I was. Like, I'm a little bit further away from it. But like when I was 15, 16, and that's an old age, you're very impressionable and you're looking for attention. And you got to picture, like, some of these kids are coming from split homes. They're not getting the attention that they would ideally get if it was an ideal sort of circumstance.
There's a huge thing with the comorbidity with some autism on the spectrum stuff too. Like, do you feel like you don't belong, that you not understand your body? And that's a lot of the symptoms of autism. There's a lot of female groups. Like, if you read the new Abigail Shrier book, which is basically heresy, it's basically it could get kicked out of polite society, but she
sounds like something I need to read.
Yeah, but I believe, I can't remember what it's called, but it's Abigail Shrier. Something it got kicked off Amazon too. But she talks about, like, rapid onset gender dysphoria and like, and the fascinating thing is the transgenderism. Historically, it's always been a thing of lots of men going to women. But the huge uptick now is actually teenage girls of female to male, which wasn't so much before. So if you try and make the argument, like with most psychological things, like, oh, the reason why we're diagnosing depression at higher rates is because we're now, more cognizant of depression. Okay. But then why aren't the rates going up of the men going to women at the same age? It's mostly females going to males. And, it goes with the same pattern in most female girls here is you have like, it's sort of a social contagion. Like one friend gets it, the other friends are likely to get it. So when you treat people with anorexia or bulimia, these are diseases that plague mostly teenage girls. The worst thing you can do is have a support group for them. Like one of the things you do with anorexia is you never put two anorexics near each other because they'll hype each other up, support each other in the disease. And like there's big problems in the anorexic community of like them finding websites to sort of, Finspiration or something where they try and get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier together. This is the same thing sort of with the new transgender thing is you put teenage girls together, and when one gets it, her friends are then much more likely to empathize with her, then go along with it too. And then once you have two, the third one becomes exponentially more likely, then the fourth one becomes exponentially more likely. And you're getting these rapid onset clusters of teenage girls transitioning at the point. And I would love if a politician in Canada had the stones, I was going to say, let's say balls to talk about this.
And that's what social media is doing. The social media environment, especially Twitter's this toxic waste heap that I should probably just get off it is what I should do. I think my life would improve immensely if I just walked away from it forever. But it's drawing these characters together. Like pedophilia was a protected thing. So it's like if you're a minor attracted person, there was a designation and a hashtag, and it's protected in the terms of service, or it was, and it's not anymore. But these people were gathered together. And when I found them, I blew my top. I'm like, I can't believe this exists. And these people are going to argue with me, and they're going to threaten me and say that I'm the abnormal one because love is love and all this stuff. It's like, so the social media environment is creating a space for these people to gather together with these problems and reinforce each other. And then as people kind of rise through the group of people and they get to the top and they've done everything they can do and they realize it wasn't for them and they fall off, well, there's nothing there to catch. They just ignore them. They block them. They shun them. And they pretend they don't exist. It's an inconvenient reality. And it's left to places like
you can
the
now
National
create
Telegraph or the Federalist to write the article up, and nobody will read it from within the community about how bad
the ability to create your own ecosystem is pretty dangerous because you couldn't back in the day. You can't just block people. You got to see back in the 90s, the people you interacted with were a decent sample size of what the population actually reflects. But that's not, especially COVID, where everyone's locked indoors. Like if you're not like me, who says, you know what, I really don't like what Christopher Freeland has to say, but I'm going to follow her. I don't like the CBC journalist. I think she's pretty dishonest. So I'm going to follow her to make sure that her news and what she likes and what Linda Sarsour likes is, okay, Linda Sarsour's opinion, Pierre Poilievre's opinion, Frank Vaughan's opinion,
You're getting a sample of opinions.
Yeah, I'm trying. I actively try and fight the algorithm with that, but not everyone does. And you're right. It's this huge problem we're facing where people will curate these radical echo chambers and then think of that as real life. And then
this is sort of a more of an American thing, just because I find Americans are more tuned in with politics. Is that they did a study where they found that liberals were far less likely to actually be able to sum up the arguments of a conservative than a conservative was to sum up the arguments of a liberal.
Jonathan Haidt's study.
Yeah. And the thing is that happens a lot with COVID, where everyone who thinks it's the new Black Death and everyone's going to die only talks to each other, and they can't even, if they see someone not walking around with a mask, they legitimately think that person's trying to kill people. They think that they're malicious and they hate other people. It's such a weirdly inhuman way of thinking about other people's thoughts.
We have adapted. I came up with a phrase the other day. I called it the plethora electric, because we have all these signals and we always talk about dopamine hits and how easy it is to get, but we have no concept of the consequences of what we've unleashed on the world in the last 20 years and what it does to us psychologically and what it does to us anthropologically and sociologically. And I think one of the obvious consequences, which we've already talked about, is people gathering together, bipartisanship shrinking and shrinking and shrinking since the advent of the internet. There's a somewhere out there on the internets, there's a chart, and it shows the U.S. House of Congress and how they vote. So on every single bill is mapped out which politician voted for what bill, and there's all these different vertices drawn between them. And as the internet becomes more and more populous, they start to break apart until there's like absolutely no cross contamination. And that is a symbol of what's happening.
Yeah, this is, again, I'll reference my psychology background here, but we've known this for a while. Like, in sort of political polarization, it's known that if you take like 10 moderate liberals who score like, let's say 5 or 6 out of 10 on the sort of left-wing scale, they're a bunch of 5 to 6 out of 10 liberals. You put them in a room, talk politics for an hour or so, then you sort of poll them again, they'll usually be around 8 to 9. Like they'll, even it's 10 moderates, if there's no other people there, they'll all polarize, and it's just natural. And this is the sort of the threat of the ecosystem. Sum up. So like
it's accelerated so much by electronics, by digital
by the ability to find your ecosystem. So besides, we're approaching almost an hour and a half. This has been the longest show we've done, and I've enjoyed every second of it, and lost some of the time. And Frank, we'd love to have you back. Maybe if Wyatt stops being a pervert, we can stream to every platform in the future.
I have appealed it. Let's see what Facebook says. That somehow.
But we like to sort of give the guests the floor to sort of end this off, make a speech, drive one home, a point or whatever. Also, NordVPN, if you want to, get away from the government, blah blah blah. Bill C10, bad. NordVPN, by link description below. VPN, you're different places. VPN good, no VPN bad. Frank.
NordVPN. I mean, I hear about it all the time. I think it's probably great. They're not sponsoring me. I'm just saying that. I have no experience with NordVPN. I think we all have to, and this is something I've been doing. Like I've dedicated some time of late. I haven't been putting out my own content, but I've been going on shows like yours, but even smaller ones. Like there's a little thing that somebody in Sault Ste. Marie is doing. There's a nurse there, and there's a guy who used to work for the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, and they're concerned citizens. And we got to build our communities out and try to get our feelers out into what other people are thinking and what they're doing. So people who might think a little bit differently from us. And if we can, and another thing I've been doing, in spite of the fact of the lockdown, I've been focusing a lot on very quiet face-to-face work in my own community. So going to see people, engaging in social interactions face-to-face. And because there's a chemical response. If people are living alone and they're not actually seeing people, it's actually very unhealthy for a human being. If you're face-to-face with somebody that you disagree with and you're talking to them one-on-one, chances are they're not going to scream Nazi, racist, anti-gay rhetoric at you. They're going to actually listen to you. You might actually move the needle. The Twitter stuff and the comments on Facebook, I do it too. We're all there, but I'm not sure we're moving the needle that way. Stuff like this might move the needle. And interactions, folks, in your own little communities, talking over the fence to your neighbor, there's not going to be one person that comes along and fixes everything. It's going to be a million people who start kind of bringing it back, and I've been focused on that a lot. And it's not something you publicize. You don't live stream while you're having a conversation with your neighbor. Like, you have to be humble about it a little.
Breaking civil conversation with your neighbor.
This is why the whole, like, the people on Facebook and Twitter who are yelling "plandemic, scandemic," like, you're not convincing anyone.
Help.
Honestly, you got to get like onto a more personal level with people and just sort of talk over the data in a very neutral way, and they'll understand. Not this sort of like, you have to consume like pages and pages of what I've read.
I disagree a little bit with you there, Wyatt, and actually say it's actually different than that. And this is my game theory when I have conversations with people who don't agree with me politically. My goal, actually, my number one win condition isn't to convince them of my points or to like win. Like, my number one win condition, which I aim for first, like the win I seek in conversation, if it's political within a political advocacy, is not to convince them. It's to have them come away and say, gee, I spoke to someone on the other side and I empathize and I get him. Just to have them see me as a person and to have a polite, like, you know what? I might not be a conservative, but I had a pleasant interaction with the conservative.
Yep. Wow, that's a human being.
That's a human being. Now, if they try and come after you and they try and put you, then go for the win and dunk, whatever. But the win condition, I think, is just to have the other person say, you know what? I disagree. He didn't really change my mind, but that's a human being. And now I see these people in a more empathetic light. And I think that's I think the goal, not so much to convince them with the facts and the data, but just to see, like, I'm coming from a place that isn't malicious. I'm going on some data. I'm not crazy. I'm not, we just have different philosophies, and that's what's going on right here. I think that's what I try. And I think, that's kind of where Frank was going.
Well, and another thing, and it highlights your point is, and I've been getting a little bit worse with this, I think, of late, because the stress of the weight of what's happening does weigh on me as well. I'm not a friggin' stone. But instead of going for the win and the jugular on every single person, if you can just slide a point under the door and just kind of get something in there and then just slowly back away and let them digest it. You don't always have to go for the finish. If you pick up that somebody has moved a little bit, back away from that. Just back away from that. Let that seed grow in their own mind, because that's where the change happens. When they're alone at night in bed thinking about what they did that day, that's where change happens. I know that's how it works with me. My conscience speaks to me.
Yeah, no one changes in the moment. Like we're like, very few people change in the middle of a conversation. Like there's that one moment where, Larry Elder kind of convinces Dave Rubin that there is no systemic racism in policing. And that one we kind of saw, and like that can be a viral moment, but like that's not what usually happens. And, Dave, it was kind of going
rare. Beautiful.
That's rare. And there was a progression that way. And the reason that happened is because Dave had hosted a bunch of different conservatives. He had well, this is a show for atheist liberals to do whatever. And then he had a bunch of conservatives who were just nice to him. He saw them as reasonable, rational people. And then at the end, he said, well, what about systemic racism to Larry Elder? And it's like, okay, here are the facts, right? And he was primed for those facts. And then you saw him sort of shift his position. So, that's, not everyone's going to have the Larry Elder moment there. But, the way you make the world a better place is you just convince people that you're rational, you're well-intentioned, you don't think they're evil. They shouldn't think you're evil. We just here's where we disagree. Here's, where we disagree on what's the range of policies. Should we be conducting policy for humans now? Should we be thinking about humans in the future? That's, what it is. Which lives do we prioritize? Is it, column A of COVID, column B? This is really what you need to do. And I was happy to have you on because I think you're someone who goes about conversations and when I watch your videos, it's pretty well thought out, pretty well researched. There's no accusations of the lizard people. It's here's where Frank is coming from, and I understand it. Although, watch out for those lizard people.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye out for them. You never know. You never know when they're going to show up.
All right, so this has been great. I think this is a great place to end the stream. We've done just over an hour and a half, and I have to go back and watch the Packers ruin my life later by drafting a long snapper in the first round. I don't know why I'm going to do that to myself, but I am. So Frank, it's been a pleasure, and we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime. Great, guys. Keep up the good work.